All right, guys, we're talking about personal finance today, and today's class we're just going to be a little bit of updates on where we're at, where we're going, and some tips on your essay now that we've got the first draft in, and I am grading those. What can you do next? What can you do to improve, or what can you do to finish if you haven't finished yet? So let's start here with where are we in this class? What's going on? Well, we need to finish up our videos that we were watching, our DVDs that we were watching, but I wanted to let you know that there was a possible issue with copyright because those are copyrighted videos. So I went ahead and I contacted Dave Ramsey's team, and they're going to get back to me on Monday, which, if you're watching this on Monday, it should be today. And I'm going to talk to them about what we can do moving forward to get these finished for you. But we do have other projects that we're working on while we wait on an answer from them. Uh, Such as our essays that we're working on. I really appreciate that most of you got the essays turned in, at least the first draft version of the essays. I'm really enjoying reading through them. They're really well put together. I really appreciate all of the thought that you put into them. There are some things that we're going to need to work on a few of them. Remember that this is just a first draft, so it's not meant to be our final version. If you didn't make it to the word count or you didn't get all of the sources in there, all of the different citations, that's okay because it is a first draft. The important part is that you sit down and you start writing and get the first uh, thing out of yourself so that you can get that turned in. And other classes will have different requirements for a first draft, but for me, what I want out of your first draft is just that you get something done and something turned into me, the beginnings of your ideas. And today we're going to go over some of the different things you can do to move forward and improve on those essays. The other thing that we're going to get back to and work on in just a few lessons here is our portfolios that I discussed with you guys. We're going to be building portfolios based off of different items that I want you guys to put together, to put basically in a folder that you can keep after this class to always be able to look at and to build something for yourself in the future so that you can look at it and kind of base, all right, this is going to be the file or the portfolio, the thing that you look at to determine where you're at financially in your life, and you'll base one for your adult life off of what we build in this class. And then finally, the final that we're going to do, and I haven't decided yet whether we're going to do a final test, a comprehensive test over all the things that we've done, or some other kind of project. So I'm going to be looking into that, and I'll let you guys know what we're going to end up doing for that final grade. As we finish the last couple of chapters, there are going to be tests on those chapters, so be prepared for those. Again, once I do hear back from Dave Ramsey. So let's take a look at how to improve. You may notice this picture over to the side. If you recognize it, then kudos to you. If you don't, then what we're looking at is a representation of Sisyphus, who is a Greek mythological figure, and whose story goes a little like this. It's in the Odyssey by Homer, and here we have Odysseus traveling to the underworld, and he's speaking now, saying, "And I saw Sisyphus at his endless task, raising his prodigious stone with both his hands. With hands and feet he tried to roll it up to the top of the hill, but always just before he could roll it over on to the other side, its weight would be too much for him, and the pitiless stone would come thundering down again onto the plain. Then he would begin trying to push it uphill again, and the sweat ran off him, and the steam rose from him." So the idea of Sisyphus, and especially since Odysseus is in the underworld, he's in Hades at this time, is he's seeing different groups of people being punished for the things that they did in their life, very similar to the Christian concept of hell. But what's going on here is these are figurative or representations of the ideas of what type of punishment it can be, and Sisyphus's punishment is a task that has no end. You work and you struggle and you try as hard as you can to get that rock up that hill, and it's always going to come back down. And this becomes a representation of life itself for a lot of people. There are writers that have taken this image and say that this is what life is, because at the end of life, we just end up dying and everything we've accomplished doesn't matter. Of course, as Christians, we have a much more optimistic view of what's going to happen at the end. But the idea here is that we're constantly trying to improve ourselves, and especially in our writing, anything artistic, anything that involves our thought to work on, we're never really finished with it. Take, for example, these videos that I'm building for you guys. As I go through these videos, I'm putting together a script, I'm putting together what I'm going to say, and I'm putting all of that into the video, doing editing for the video, and then I watch it back after I've even uploaded it to YouTube, and I see little mistakes and little things here and there that I feel like, man, I want to go back and I want to fix that, and I want to say it a different way, and I want to explain it a little bit differently. And if I did that, I could do that for one thing for the rest of my life. I can never perfect it. We're never going to perfect anything that we work on. It reaches a point where you're just done with it. It has to reach a point where it achieves what it needs to achieve, and it's as good as it needs to be, rather than perfection. We strive for perfection. We want to make things good. We want to make things as good as we can and put everything into the things that we do, but we simply can't reach that level of perfection. And your papers are kind of this way. I know that some of you are going to have the tendency, and it's a tendency that I have, to just kind of sit back and let what I write on the page be the last thing that comes out. But you want to rewrite your essay. I know I have this tendency. Once I've written something, I don't want to change it anymore. I don't want to go back to it, because I do see all those little mistakes. I do see all the things that I want to reword and want to say over again, and I end up throwing away what I worked on so hard the first time in order to just start over. What you want to do is you want to get to a point where you don't do that, where you can look back at it and you can actually edit and rewrite what it is that you've written before, so that you can improve on it, so that you can restate what you've said using better language, using more clear structure. And there are ways that you can do that. So even though we're not going to reach perfection with these essays, you can improve upon what you did in your first case. It's really easy to say, I did it once, that's it, I'm going to be done with it. But let me tell you, there are a lot of college professors that are going to be able to tell that this is a first draft paper, that you didn't work hard enough on it, and they're going to give you bad grades for it. So you need to be able to not only write your paper once, but write it more than once so that you can actually improve it. The first draft, like I said before, is just so that you get the words out there on the page. When you go back and you look at it, you may determine that some of the stuff that you wrote, you don't actually want that in there anymore. You may want to add something to it. So let's look at some of the things that you can do. Your first draft is your first attempt, not your last. Always keep that in mind. Always keep in mind it's your first attempt. The writing process isn't a natural thing. It's not something that comes easily to just about anybody. There are some people out there that say that they're genius writers. They say Stephen King writes a dozen books every couple of months, that he just keeps writing and won't stop. None of us are geniuses on that level. We have to learn how to write, and how to write well. It takes work, it takes effort. It's not something that is just going to come out there on the page. And if you feel that it is, that's great. It's great that you feel like you have that strength, but let me tell you, your writing is still not perfect. No one's is, and it can always use improvement. It's something that everyone needs to work on. So I want to make that as simple as possible to everyone. So what I say is that we should get started again. We get started by going back to the beginning, and we look at structure. Whether you've already written your paper or didn't turn in the first draft and you're just starting now, the first thing you need to look at is how your paper is going to be structured. Let me be very clear that having a structure for your paper, having a plan for how it's going to be written, is the best way to make it easy on yourself, so that you're not stressing out over what you're going to write and what's going to fill in your 1,000 word count. When you're looking at structure, it's going to create that plan that will make it easier for you, and you won't have to stress out about it. I know some of you have contacted me saying you don't know what to write about. You don't know how to get more words on the page than just a few words here and there, and how to get to that 1,000 word count. Others of you get there very easily, but you might do so in a sloppy sort of way, where you just kind of throwing out as many words as you possibly can until you get to the end. Structure will keep you from struggling at either of those. It will give you the framework to which you can build your essay upon like you're building a building, so that you will be able to easily get to that 1,000 word count without struggling, and you can limit yourself to it so that you're not just throwing a bunch of nonsense out there either. So I gave the example of Jane Schaefer essays, the Jane Schaefer structure. But when I look back at that video, again, one of those things where you can look back and you can see, oh man, I wish I had done that differently. I just kind of gave you guys a one-page thing with all of this information on it, which you had to read through on your own. And I explained it, but I realized that that was kind of overwhelming, that some of you may look at that and go, I don't know what I'm looking at. So I want to break it down a little bit more in this video, and I want to take a look at what each of those processes are. But I'll do that in just a minute here with a slide. The first thing you want to do after you have your structure in place, so the idea of what your structure is going to look like, is then you want to brainstorm. This is where you come up with your ideas. What are your main points going to be? Before you write anything down or do research on any paper, start thinking about the topic. Start thinking about what it is that you want to say with it. What is your opinion on it to start with? Maybe by the time you do some research and some reading, your opinion may change, but at the start, you have an idea of what it is that you want to say, and you can come up with your main points, at least 3 main points that you want to put down in your paper, so that you can then go from there, write those down, and you come up with those main points to have and say, this is what I'm going to say with my paper. Then you form an outline, and I know you guys have done outlines in other classes, and I had you guys do an outline, I think in Constitution as well. Outlining your paper just gives you that structure again of what you're going to say, and it does it in a kind of abbreviated fashion so that you can keep track of all of the points that you're making, all of the ideas that you have, and be able to look at it and say, does this actually follow that? Does the next point that I'm making make sense after having said this? And you can actually put it in a way that makes sense just from an overhead view, looking down on it, kind of like flying over a field. If you're low enough in the plane, you can look down and you can see what's going on in the field below you, and you see it from what they call a bird's eye view. You're able to see everything that's there and make a better idea than if you were down on the ground. If you were standing on the ground, you couldn't see where everything was, but from up above, you can see it very clearly. That's what an outline does to your paper. You can see very clearly where everything is going in there. So once you have an outline, and this is how you do an outline. You simply do the number system that I'm sure that you've looked at, and even just looking at the structure of what I have here is considered an outline. I have a major point, then I have a minor point. I have a major point, and then I have a minor point. All you have to do is you number that out, and then you fill in the blanks. So you can have an empty outline sitting in front of you. You fill in the blanks for each of the points you're going to make within it. And let's take a look a little bit closer. I think at the next step that you want to do is you want to reread your paper. Once you've written your first draft, you want to reread what you've written so that you can determine what it is that you've said well, what you haven't said well. Maybe there's a point in there that you think doesn't fit anymore and you want to change it to a different point. Maybe there's something that you can reword and put it a little bit differently. One of the major things that you can do after you reread your paper is you can add details. Let's say that you've made a general point, you've made something, a point that you want to make, but you haven't specifically stated it. So you can add details to the paper in the next sentence and the sentence after that, you add specific things. You can remove repetition so that if you're reading through and you go, man, I just said that thing a paragraph ago and I'm saying it again here, you say, okay, let me put it where it works best in the paper and remove the time that I repeat it so that it's not just me saying the same thing over and over again. Next, you can correct mistakes. This is where you look at grammar and spelling and things like that. If you don't look through it, several of you had several grammar mistakes, several spelling mistakes, especially on your first draft. I'm not going to take off for that, but I'm going to expect you guys to do corrections. I don't grade them very heavily on those things because this isn't an English class, but in most of your college classes, you're going to be expected to have basic grammar down, your basic spelling down, and then some professors will take off for each of those things and give you lower grades for not having things written out properly, and especially if it's egregious, if there's a ton of spelling errors, if there's a ton of grammar mistakes, it just becomes unreadable. So you want to go back through and correct the mistakes that you've made in your paper. Also, you want to figure out what doesn't work. There may just be some arguments that don't make sense, some things that when you thought of it, when you were brainstorming, it made a lot of sense to you, and now that you're reading through it again, like, oh, that doesn't really make sense. So maybe I can reword it some way. Maybe I can take it out. Maybe I can move it to a different place in the paper. Something like that. That's one of the advantages to rereading it and going over and re-editing your own paper. So let's take a look at this idea of an outline now. What exactly are we going to do about it? What happens with the Jane Schaefer essay in an outline form? Well, we start with our introductory paragraph, and we're going a little bit deeper into what each of these are in just a little bit. But an introductory paragraph is pretty self-explanatory. You start out by introducing the topic. The first sentence that you have should be what your topic is, or some kind of quote to kind of bring the reader in to let you know what's going on in here. Some of you did a quote. That's really excellent. I really appreciate that. If you don't like the way it sounds with a quote, you can just start with your topic. You can just state what your topic is, but you are going to do that essentially in your next statement, your thesis. What's it all about? Now, the difference between a topic and a thesis is going to be your thesis is your opinion on the topic, or your argument or your position on what it is that you're saying about the topic. If the topic is the coronavirus, or the topic is the economy during the coronavirus, or how your family is dealing with the coronavirus, your thesis is whether or not you think we're overreacting to the coronavirus. Your thesis could be, we are overreacting to what's going on in the country right now, or that you're really afraid of what's happening in the country right now. That could be your thesis. What your position is, or what your actual idea of your paper is, okay, as opposed to the topic, which is just more general than that. Then the third sentence is going to be your first major point, the first major point that you come up with. Now, this major points are going to come back up in your body paragraphs, and you'll see that in a minute. But so these are different sentences. Your first sentence is going to be a topic or a quote, and sometimes the quote will last more than one sentence, but we're kind of basically sticking to this structure. If you go over in word count or in sentences, that's fine. This structure is meant to guide you, not to limit you. So you have your first major point here. Your second sentence, or excuse me, your fourth sentence here is going to be your major point 2, your second major point. And then you get your third major point right there. And then once you have all three of those, you start your body paragraphs. Your body paragraphs are what your actual essay is going to be written up about. So you've got your topic, you've got your thesis, and then you've got each of your major points, so that by the end of your introductory paragraph, as someone reading your paper, if I'm reading your paper for the very first time, I should know exactly what you're going to say in the paper. I should know what it is you're talking about, what your position or what your opinion is about it, what argument you're making in regards to your topic, what your major points or your major arguments are about the topic. And then we get to the body paragraph where you flesh all of that out. So start in your body paragraphs with your first sentence being your first major point. Again, I've color-coded this so you can see where each of these points go. Your first major point will be restated here. Anything that you restate, you don't need to use the same words over again. In fact, you don't want to use the exact same wording over again. You want it to be clear that it's the same thing you're talking about, but you want to reword it just a little bit differently so that it can come across as something fresh, and that will help you with transitioning into different points that you're making about it. The second sentence in your first body paragraph, the second body paragraph here needs to be your major point number 2. So this is one paragraph, this is another paragraph. And then your third paragraph is going to be major point number 3. Now, on the next slide, I think it is, we're going to go over more what's going into this body. So we're going to split these up and look at them more closely in the next slide. But just know that here we have one paragraph built up of our 5 sentences here. And here we have 3 paragraphs, and you're restating your major points 1, 2, and 3 in those paragraphs. Then we get to our concluding paragraph, where you restate your thesis, again, not word for word. That's your first sentence of your concluding paragraph, should be somehow transitioning into restating what your thesis was after you've made your major points. You can then state, so because of that, that's why you think whatever your thesis is. Then in your conclusion, you restate your first major point, your second major point, and your third major point. Notice with the color coordination, once you've come up with your major points and your thesis, most of your writing is pretty much done. And that's why I wanted to color coordinate this, because even though you're writing new sentences down here, you're just rewriting the same 3 sentences that you've gotten already from your introduction and your body paragraphs over here. Then the final sentence in your concluding paragraph should be to sum up your essay as best you can. So here is the basic structure, and now we're going to break down a little bit what each of these 3 body paragraphs should be saying. So here are some specifics. Each of the body paragraphs will be built up of these things. Sentence number 1, a main sentence. That's your main talking point number 1, your main topic, or your main point. Sentence number 2 is going to be your first quote or a fact, something that came from one of the videos or an article that you read, some research that you have, something that supports this main point. Sentence number 3, your own reasoning or a personal point to support the idea of your main point and confirm your fact or your quote. So you have something from your own life that's happening that you've seen, or something that you think that actually shores up this idea in the fact. Maybe your main sentence can, your main point here can be about how bad the economy is doing in here, and so you throw out a statistic of what's going on with the jobs, and then you talk about someone that you know that is struggling to find a job right now or has recently lost their job. That can be an example of how you can structure this right now. But then we have sentence number 4, notice the color coordination again, a second quote or a fact, something from the videos or the articles that we've gone over, or that you've researched on your own. So now you have your main point, a quote or just a fact from one of the things that we've read about. Make sure to cite your source, then use your own reasoning or a personal point, and then bring up a second quote or a second fact. And then your sentence number 5 is again using your own reasoning or a personal point. It doesn't have to be something that's going on personally in your life. It can just be your own ideas, or restating the ideas of the facts in your own words, so that you're reasoning your way through it. You're thinking about what was said in here and how it relates to your main point that you're making. This is one paragraph. This is one paragraph of your body paragraph. So there's three sets of these that will be the body of your essay. Notice again that the way that I've set this up for you, the way it's set up in the Jane Schaefer model, is that you pretty much already have this written for you, because you already have your main point. Then these quotes, these facts, you've gotten that from your research. Here in the blue section, you can just be restating what it is that you think about that, what these facts or these quotes made you think about in regards to your main point. So it's pretty much already written for you. This is what I'm talking about when I say that a structure gives you the ability to write even when you don't know what you want to write about. When you don't know what is going on a topic, you can come up with a structure like this and be able to write a ton about something that you didn't know about 5 minutes ago. Just a little bit of research, just a little bit of thinking, and you can have it written out. And that is all, folks. That is all we're doing for today, is we're going over this Jane Schaefer model. I hope that that was helpful to you. I want to point out that I'm not grading you based on the Jane Schaefer model. If you decide not to follow it, I'm not going to take points off. But if your paper is sloppy, if your paper doesn't have any sort of structure, then that may lead to some points off on there if it's difficult to follow, difficult to read, that sort of thing. So I want you guys to make sure that you're checking iGrade, make sure that you are looking at all this stuff. Again, I'm going to get back to you on what Dave Ramsey says about how we can finish up our videos and finish our tests on there. Be on the lookout for other assignments that I'm giving you, other videos and articles that I'm going to be sending out to you. Let me know if you're having any more trouble or any more specific questions about your essays or anything else, guys. I hope that you're all staying safe, you're staying healthy, and I will see you guys soon.